So this past weekend I went and saw two movies. I saw Bodies, 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 which I didn't really want to see. I didn't think it was going to be great, but I gave it a shot, and I actually ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would, although the jury's still out as to whether or not I actually enjoyed it in the same way that the director intended for me to enjoy it, but nevertheless, I enjoyed it all the same. And then I saw The Invitation, which was a movie I actually really wanted to see. I love a good vampire story, so I was intrigued, and gotta say I was a little let down by this one. The Invitation. So The Invitation is a new take on the vampire genre, and it stars Natalie Emmanuel as Evie, and she's, your average working class girl from New York. And after working a gig as a waitress at this Ancestry.com knockoff party, she gets access to a DNA kit, which she does, and she discovers that she's related to this incredibly wealthy family of British people. And one of them just happens to be in New York, and they go out for coffee, they reconnect, and he talks her into going to England for this big wedding. The family can't wait to meet her, and she reluctantly agrees to go, but as soon as she gets there, there's a lot of things that are just a little out of place. And, well, it's a vampire movie, so you can kind of guess where this is going. But what intrigued me about this movie is that the setup is almost this Hallmark movie wish fulfillment. You have this working class girl that realizes that she's inherited all this money, and that there's this very handsome and charming lord of the manor that she's not related to, so there's no weird incestuous stuff going on there. But he's flirting with her, she's flirting back, they have a bit of a romance blooming. The only downside is that he's, of course, a vampire, so it's doomed to fail sooner or later. But as someone who's had to sit through more than their fair share of that type of Hallmark movie, I was very excited to see that trope subverted with the inclusion of vampires. And for the first half to 2/3 of this movie, I was on board. I was liking all the build-up. I liked how they set up her job and her best friend, and then meeting her relatives. I thought that was all handled pretty darn well. But it wasn't just Hallmark movie fluff. There was actual intrigue and foreshadowing and little glimpses behind the curtain where something's wrong, and you see vampire attacks, but they're kind of in the periphery. They haven't really come into focus yet, or at least our main character hasn't identified it specifically yet. But nevertheless, there are still some really interesting and suspenseful vampire sequences where you see maids kind of going off on their own, and they're getting picked off like they're just sheep for the slaughter, which is actually one of the better ideas in this movie. It's that the maids are all numbered. They all have a little number on their collar and on the hem of their dress, and that only racks up the tension, because in the back of your mind you're thinking, okay, how long is it going to take for all the maids to disappear? And when they're all gone, it looks like Evie's gonna be next. But then the midpoint of the film happens, where Walter, the lord of the manor, and Evie's relationship really comes to a head. They sleep together, and Walter proposes marriage, and Evie accepts. And then the very next scene, we have this very fancy, expensive dinner. The whole family's there. They're all in weird, masquerade masks. It's a little creepy and foreboding, but Evie shows up and they announce their engagement to everybody, and they're all like, here, here. And it's here where we realize that this wedding that the whole family has shown up for was always planned to be for Walter and Evie. The other bride and groom, they don't exist. But all this really isn't a surprise, because if you've seen the trailer, that's kind of how the trailer went. You had this really romantic idea of reuniting with family and then having a crush on the Lord, but then finding out that they're all a bunch of vampires, and of course you can't marry them, and now she's in danger and she needs to escape. That's what the trailer set up, and that's for the most part what this movie's delivered on. But something happens at this midpoint where the movie just kind of starts falling apart a bit. And it really makes me sad, because in the first part of this movie I was like, okay, I can get on board with this. The script doesn't always have the best written dialogue, because a lot of it is pretty cheesy and cliche and just general romantic Hallmark stuff. But I was willing to excuse that because that's the trope that it's playing on. But after this twist is revealed, it's almost like the screenwriter just didn't really know what to do after that. Well, I won't give too much away, because this is where the spoilers do start coming. You would think that Evie is now in a situation where she needs to get out. She needs to escape. She's got to maneuver her way, kill a few vampires, do the whole stake through the heart, maybe light some on fire, maybe even set up some traps using the architecture of this mansion to outthink and outplay the vampires. But that's not really what happens. The movie kind of meanders. There's an escape attempt, but it's not that interesting. And there's a lot of sitting sitting around and dumping exposition on how vampires work in this movie, and I don't really think you needed a lot of that. I was really hoping that when all the secrets got revealed that the movie would kick on and it'd become a bit more of a action survival movie. And really what this movie needed was one or two allies to help Evie navigate this now upside down world that she's fallen into. And the movie does give us one, and that's her maid, but the maid helps her with her initial escape, but then without giving too much away, for one reason or another, she can't help her anymore, so Evie is once again on her own. And I thought, okay, so she got a little bit of help from this maid. Maybe the butler is going to help her, because the butler, played by Sean Pertwee, is one of the most criminally underused actors in this movie. He's the butler. You know, he keeps tabs on everything. He's very close with the family. He's kind of in charge of all those numbered maids that have been led to the slaughter over the course of this movie. So I thought it'd be a very cool twist to have him actually turn out to be a vampire hunter, and that he was just undercover all this time to get close to the family and just waiting for his opportunity. And the fact that he is the one person that actually seems to have an issue with Evie's nationality, that could have just been him overcompensating for his cover. I don't know, I think there is a way to make that work, where somewhere in the third act you could have Evie and Mr. Fields come face to face, and she thinks that he's gonna kill her, but actually he's like, listen, we can do this together. I'll show you some of the tricks. And he reveals that he's the Van Helsing of this universe. There was a long time in this movie where I was waiting for that twist to come, and it just kind of never did. That's kind of a shame, but Evie does end up taking on a few members of this family in a very rushed climax. I don't know why, but for me watching it, I expected it to go on maybe twice as long as it actually did, because it was really only like 15 to 20 minutes of action and vampire hunting and stakes through the heart, you know, all the stuff that you really do come to a vampire movie to see. There's just something about vampire movies where you can get so creative on how to kill a vampire, even though you have these, you know, very basic tropes. But what separates the truly great vampire movies above the rest is how they're able to creatively incorporate those tropes into memorable kills. And to this movie's credit, it does have one, maybe two, that would qualify as a creative and memorable kill. But just based on the setup, you have one woman going against an entire family of vampires. You kind of expect a bit more vampire fight in action. They could have stretched that out and made it an even 2 hours, and I don't think anybody would complain. But okay, she takes on the family, everything seems to be winding down, coming to a close, and it goes to black. And I'm thinking, okay, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. I just thought the third act was a little weak and rushed, given the hour of build-up leading up to it. I was expecting some pretty awesome payoff, and it just wasn't there, but, you know, it gave us something. It wasn't a total dismal failure. But then it fades back in, and it's 2 weeks later, and it's this little epilogue section. And if I could review this movie based on just the epilogue, this movie would be 0 out of 5 stars. It would be easily the worst thing that I've seen all summer. This epilogue is truly terrible. First of all, it sounds like the audio and the video were not filmed at the same time. It seems very ADR. They almost never cut to any of the actors' faces. The camera's either behind their heads or they're talking, moving into an alleyway on their phone, so you can't see their mouth. And on top of that, the lines that they actually say are some of the most wooden, at times nonsensical, and sequel-baity lines that you could ever show in a kind of a post-credit scene. And that's really what this feels like. This feels like a post-credit scene that was just kind of tacked right onto the end of the movie because they knew that nobody was going to actually stay for all the credits. But the worst part really is the sequel-baity nature of it, because you see Evie and her best friend, and they're supposedly this vampire hunting duo, or at least that's what it's setting up. And it shows that there are still members of the family out there that are still vampires, and they're still dangerous, that never really got taken care of in the actual climax. So it just makes the ending of the movie feel hollow, that she never really accomplished what she set out to do in that climax, which was to just wipe out this whole family. And while in the movie you don't actually see her kill every member of the family, it's kind of implied. But no, this wannabe post-credit scene completely undermines that resolution, and it really left a bad taste in my mouth. We're walking out of the theater, all I could think about was just how terrible that final little epilogue was, and it made me start to question some of the parts of the movie that I actually kind of enjoyed. But now, as a whole experience, I gotta say I'm very disappointed with this movie. I thought it was going to be a lot better than it actually was, and honestly I'd kind of rather go see Bodies, Bodies, Bodies again. At least that one made me laugh at how dumb everything was. This movie at the same time tries too hard but also not hard enough where it really counts. But now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about The Invitation? Have you seen it? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.